Hey, welcome in. It's a Husker247 Daily on a Tuesday. Michael Brunts, Brian Christopherson. Quiet little week here in Lincoln. Not much to talk about. Brian, where do you want to go first? I'm guessing we're talking Matt Rhule, Penn State, and what Matt Rhule said yesterday in his press conference about it. Probably not the definitive thanks but no thanks that some fans might have been hoping for, but some other things that kind of were raised as well during Rhule's conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted him to just flat out say like, no, nothing to see here, moving on, that wasn't the case. But he sounded like a guy who's done this before, who's been in situations where you understands leverage. He's not like Kramer on Seinfeld, where he just like says,
I'll
"I'll
take
I'll
it.
take the billboard," like. Um, so there's probably something to be learned there, and we talked about it on Husker247 Daily yesterday. The main point to us maybe was, if you're going to leverage something, it's not about his salary. His salary is right up there amongst like the top 15 or top 20 in the country. It would probably be more about like your pot of money for players and like how deep that goes. And, he mentioned some of those rosters that are 35, 40 million or whatever. And, maybe there's a tendency around here to say, well, that's not how it's done in Nebraska. And, his point was, well, I'd like it to be like, let's be that team that competes like, or is at that table with those schools. So I think that's probably the part of the 4 to 5 questions he answered on it that a lot of people nationally will run past and overlook. And I don't think they should, because I think there's a key there was a key comment that was more about Nebraska than it had to do with anything Penn State there.
Yeah, no, I think it is a little bit of leverage, and it's kind of like, okay, if you're going to have if we're going to have the conversation about what this place can be, let's have it. And you go back to what Matt Rhule has said at various points about just the state of college football nowadays, what you need to compete. Maybe where Nebraska's fallen a little bit short there when they've been looking for players in the transfer portal. I think there's been a few limitations there. Um, this is an opportunity to have that conversation with a little bit of leverage. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to go up front and fully embrace Nebraska and say this is he sees the potential here. He loves it here. He said, but there's also more that needs to be done when you start talking about NIL and the stuff above the rev share. When you start talking about stadium projects that have basically been shelved because of stuff going on with budgetary concerns at Nebraska and the optics of that. So I don't I don't think that anything he said on Monday was a surprise to Troy Dannon. I think, if anything, those are probably things that both of them would like to push forward and know that they need to do to be competitive nowadays in college sports. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, it is. You basically, like you said, you have two conversations going on right now, and I think both of them are very valid. And I mean, when you start talking about, okay, if Penn State is truly interested and, Matt Rhule really is number one on their list, as some of these hot boards have said, I think from Nebraska's side of things, to kind of sweeten the deal, to keep him here, it's not his contract where you need to be making those changes. I mean, it's the last 2 years of his deal, he makes $12 million a year, which would be number 3 in college football right now. It's the NIL stuff and everything that's around that makes a place competitive. He's fought hard for the food, and you're taking chefs on road trips now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is all part of that picture of how you're going to be competitive with the way college sports is now.
Yeah, and I think on Sunday when James Franklin was fired, you saw the initial stuff, and Matt Rhule's just the obvious like name that is going to pop up to people, and I don't doubt people's reporting and all that, but I think it's also a case, Bruns, where within a half hour, you have like Rhule's picture everywhere about it, and there's sort of, I think sometimes right off the bat, reporters go to like the industry insiders, quote unquote, and see what they have to say. and the industry insider may or may not know anything, but they say what is like kind of obvious to everyone, like, oh, well, it could be this guy. You got to think about his relationship with Pat Kraft. They're really good friends. And I think there's some of that happens right off the bat that I don't read more into it than it's just that. And so I think it's interesting you brought up Troy Dan in there, because there's no question Matt Rhule has spoken about his relationship with Pat Kraft in the past, and it's real. I think he has a really strong one with Dannon now too. Like, it's like, I do think they're guys who um, complement each other pretty well. I think he was a AD that Rhule was very excited about when he got here, and I think that's only grown. And so when he says stuff, I don't doubt that it is somewhat connected to Dannon's thoughts too, like you said. So that's just something to remember, because you're going to see a lot of the Rhule Kraft connection. Well, the Rhule Dannon connection is pretty real too. And that counts for a lot, obviously, that you like your boss, or you feel like you can see like the vision the same way. And I think they do here.
What do you make of just, short week, kind of an emotional win over Maryland on the road, and a Minnesota team that's really been pretty tough to Nebraska over the last 5 matchups, but you get kind of a tough game waiting at the end of this week. Do you get the sense that it's a distraction yet, or what do you kind of make of where this is falling in the season? Because this feels like a really important game to kind of not have what happened last year happen again.
I don't think it will be a distraction, because I don't think kids are easily like, if they really like, if there's a feeling like, oh, there's a definite change in the air or something like that, then yes. But I don't think that's what it is over there. I don't think they believe that. And how good Rhule is about like talking to the fans and media about like a situation and saying, putting it in a way that I think makes people feel comfortable. It's probably that times 10 when he can be really candid with his own team, like behind the walls about something. And it sounded like they talked through this on Sunday. So I don't think it's going to have a factor on this game. I really don't. I think it's almost useful too that Minnesota has sort of bludgeoned Nebraska, not in, like in the score, but in the results of 5 straight wins over the past seasons. A couple of them were bad scores, I guess. But I think that has, this team's attention fully, and like they know they need to go up there and end that streak, just like they ended the Wisconsin one last year. And, I think it's a matchup that can be favorable for Nebraska too, when you get inside it, which we will more this week of, you're going against a young quarterback, freshman QB, and I think he's done some good stuff, but I think John Butler's defense can be a challenge for him. And so I don't know. I like where this team is at. I think they have a good culture over there, and it was sort of talked about all offseason, and then it gets tested, the last couple of weeks, like, okay, is it really as good as they said it was? And I think they kind of answered that it is, like in the way they responded against Michigan State and, obviously at Maryland, where that would have been a loss a year or two ago.
Stat: Nebraska looking for first back-to-back road win since 2006. Is that right?
Incredible. Yeah, that's Rhule brought it up even.
That's kind of remarkable whenever you just say it out loud. But do you remember which games they were?
No, they did beat A&M at the end, right? I don't know if you're on the case.
They did beat that. It wasn't that one. But
so they lost before that to like Oklahoma State on the road, didn't they, or something?
They beat Iowa State, and then they beat Kansas State.
Oh, Ron Prince.
And then coming home was 22-20 to Texas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, I remember that. Yeah, and then they did get a big one at A&M later in the year. So, yeah, that hurts to hear that out loud. 2006. That's like should never be the case that it's taken that long. And so that's what this week's about. You need to like start like chopping wood. Like, I know Nebraska fans didn't want that game Saturday to take years off their life like it did, but in a way, it's one of those where, well, they checked off another thing. They won a game where, there was those graphs that are like this long, like a scroll that Moses would have pulled out, and it's like, this is how many games they've lost in a row where they couldn't score on the last drive, and they pulled it out. And So you got that one. Now you can try to get the Minnesota one. Now you can try to get this weird road one that's 19 years old. So I guess that's useful, right?
Yeah, I'm just imagining Moses taking the giant like stone up there with all the bad Nebraska losses chiseled into it. That'd be a big
Yeah.
stone, a lot of stone.
Yeah. I don't know why I went that route, but um, yeah, this is a weird. There are weird streaks that are attached to this program, and every time you get a chance to punch one out, you got to do it. And I think this Minnesota one would be big, Brunt, because you think about schools that not only has Nebraska dinged themselves, obviously, for losing, but they've elevated in the process. I
Hmm.
think of no school more than Minnesota and PJ Fleck. Nothing against PJ, but he has gotten a lot of lift out of winning games against Nebraska at moments when his program sometimes was in a little bit of a precarious spot, and he sort of used it as a bounce. And so they need to turn the tables for once.
They do. We'll see if Nebraska can part the Red Sea up in
There we
Minneapolis
go.
this week on Friday. Keep it locked on Husker 24/7. We'll have plenty from everything leading up to the game, during the game, and after